Okay, the idea is that what we're going to do is try and take a relatively two-dimensional picture, as you all have in front of you, and turn it into the 3D picture that we have there. Can you see that on the camera?
Awesome, yeah, we can see that.
Wow.
So before I put pen to paper, we're going to do it in stages, and everyone should be able to follow along. We'll just quickly talk about the light source. So as you can see here, I've got a little torch. Wherever you put the light, you want the shade the opposite way. So if I take it back to the original, the light source is at the top, all the shade and all the heavy line work is at the bottom.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So with this one I've got in front of me, I've just done some of the line work just to cut down on the time, but I'm going to use the slightly thicker pen, which is the 0.3, and just add some heavier line work in, which faces away from that torch light.
Awesome. Now, loads of love already for this show. Loads of people watching and commenting along. Monica saying, woohoo, I can't wait. Christian says, hello, Sarah, Joe and Baz. I've got the Discovery Kit. The outlining is amazing. Victoria saying, I'm so excited for this show. She's in North Carolina. Kay says, good morning, Sarah, Joe and Baz. Welcome, Baz, to our crafty group. We are a fun bunch, she goes on to say. Kathy saying hi, Baz, as well. The mandalas are amazing. A lot of you looking forward to Baz's demonstrations as well. Karen saying so. June says hi, Baz. Thank you for being with all of us. And Diana Cox saying as well, so excited for this show. Loving all of Baz's work. Baz has got loads of artwork with him in the studio, which we're going to have a look at as we go through the show. So here with the lining them, Baz, is there a sort of rule to follow when it comes to putting the lines down on the paper? Not really.
What I would say is do what works best for you. I mean, I tend to use the thicker lines first because then I always know where I need to put the shadow. But there's no right or wrong way really. The idea for me is just enjoying the product, and more importantly, enjoying the process.
So with the difference between the thick lines and the thin lines, is that you adding more pressure with the pen, or are you changing the pen?
No, so within the kit you'll have a couple of pens, and this one is the 0.3, and then I'm working with the 0.05. So I'll use the thicker pen just to create the thicker lines. But if you've only got one pen, obviously you could just adjust your line width with the finer one. But yeah, there's no real different technique. It's just literally the thickness of the nib.
Awesome. And I guess with the download as well, don't forget you're going to be able to just go over those lines that Baz has created there for you. God Desire for me on YouTube says, I have my Discovery Kit at the ready. Tool Chicky 8 says, so excited, loving all of these techniques. And Betsy saying, so excited to watch Baz do his thing. He's so talented, isn't he, Betsy? He really, really is indeed. We're very lucky to have him in the studio with us. I can already start to see, Baz, all that depth and dimension that you're getting there, even just by laying down some of the lines. It's amazing, isn't it? It starts to come to life.
So there might be a few mistakes. I'm working a little bit quicker than I normally would for the benefit of TV, but sorry.
No, it's
Sarah
good.
Speed, I think. Sarah.
Oh, Sarah Speed. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
And Sarah is colouring along as well, so it'll be interesting to see how Sarah's is turning out there too. So with the light source then at the top, guessing the thicker lines though go towards the bottom, do they, Baz? That how you start to create that dimension?
Yeah, exactly that. And that you can determine at the start of the picture wherever you want the light source. So I've left that in there, so they're opposite. But obviously, if you wanted the shading at the top, you just do it the opposite way.
We love a lot of love for the little light in the comments.
Yeah.
I need a little light, Baz. All I've done is draw a big arrow on mine. It's really boring in comparison.
Well, that's what I would normally do, is just in pencil, just put a T for the top, so you know where the light source always is going to be.
Awesome, it's coming along absolutely beautifully. Laurie says, hello, really looking forward to the show. Elizabeth as well, the mandalas look so three-dimensional. Lisa's got hands on the TriBlend brush pens. Congratulations. Mariah saying the light source tool is such a great idea, so you know exactly where that light is coming from. And Robin saying, hello everyone, order the Mandala Discovery Kit, love Baz's work. That was something I was going to say to you earlier. In fact, don't think that just because this show is now airing that it's too late for you. You can share this Facebook Live, you can bookmark this video on YouTube and place your order now, and know that when your Discovery Kit arrives, or your TriBlends or your TriBlend brush pens arrive, you've got everything that you then need to get yourself started, which is fantastic. So you've always got the inspiration there available to you over on the website. So has that been done so far with all the same pen there, Baz?
Yep, it's all with a 0.3 pen.
Awesome, really great to see that starting to come to life. Jennifer saying she loves the step-by-step tutorial. Julie saying, please tell us about the torch he is using. That is just to indicate the light source, Baz, is that right?
Yeah, purely and simply just as a guide to see. Like, normally I wouldn't use that. Obviously I would just put a little pencil mark at the top, so I know that the shading always needs to be opposite that, really.
Awesome. There's I didn't realise until recently, Baz, just how many different mandalas there are as well. There's like loads and loads of different styles. It's one of those things that the more you seem to research it and look into it, or once you've seen them, you start seeing them everywhere, which is amazing. And they do seem to be particularly on trend at the moment.
Definitely. And the good thing about them, there is no right or wrong way to do them. So I don't really have a design in mind when I start. I just start with the compass, set the design up, and then it just grows organically.
And do you know what, I mean, I was looking through your Instagram, looking at some of your incredible work. How do you describe your work, Baz?
3D symmetry, I guess.
Okay.
Oh, that sounds fancy.
It does sound very fancy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I love it, Baz, because I would never have, I'll be really honest, I wouldn't know where to start drawing one of these. And if I'm being really honest, it wouldn't interest me drawing it.
No.
However, I love this part. So like having a go at advancing what you've done. So working with like the compass or whatever really wouldn't interest me. But I'm really liking just kind of getting a little bit lost and going over this. And I had done a bit of a Sarah jobby, and I'd been going really fast, and I started going out the lines at first. And now I've slowed myself right down and decided to just kind of stop trying to rush. I've surprised myself with how good results I've started getting now.
Yeah, I'm a little bit the same as well at the moment. But yeah, one of the biggest tips I can give people is just take your time, enjoy the process. The longer you spend on it, the more accurate your results will be. So now we're going to introduce some colour. So we're going to use the TriBlend brush. As you said, we're using the jade green. In this section, what we're going to do is just focus on the basic colouring. So that's any image or any part of the image that you think would be flat or angled. You just colour them in a solid colour. So it's just basic generic colouring. So we've got one here that I'm going to colour in as you can see. And then that's basically just before we get to any blending of the part of the mandala.
So how do you determine which are the flattened angled bits? How do you arrive at that point?
It's kind of just looking at, if you can imagine it as a 3D object, anything that would be a flat surface is what you just use a single tone on. So there's not actually any blending in this section.
Awesome.
And are you on the mid colour there, Baz?
I'm on the light colour.
The lightest colour.
And I guess, Sarah, these brushes great because they lay down, for especially these bigger, wider sections, they lay down a lot of colour, don't they?
Well, they're brilliant because so I'm using like the fine tip to get into those little fine edges, but then I'm also using the wide brush nib to cover some larger areas at the same time. Because I like to do everything efficiently, Joe, and with speed.
Yes.
And this kind of gives me the opportunity to do that. So I hadn't done this to this level. So one of the things I think I'd got wrong when I was doing the Blended Mandala Kit is I was doing some of the colouring first and then going in and adding the thicker lines over the top afterwards.
Right.
Whereas actually this way, it's much more forgiving and easy to come up to. And it's nice because I'm going right up to that pen line, and I'm not worried that I'm going to, infect the nib of my pen or anything like that. I'm just going straight over it. And I will say I know I love me TriBlends, but these brushes in particular are just fabulous. And I am going to be doing some techniques. So while Baz kind of because obviously it's quite a big mandala, so what's going to happen is Bad's going to explain some bits, and then in between his bits, where he's kind of getting ready for the next one, I'm going to do some techniques with the TriBlends with you, so I will show you some of the techniques with them in a few minutes.
Awesome. How have you been getting on with these TriBlend brush pens? How long have you been playing with them for now, Baz?
So I've been playing them for about a fortnight, and exactly as Zara says, I love the fact that you can cover a lot of area with them. You know, they blend really nicely, but you've also got that additional fine point that you can get into the corners and create lots of detail with them.
Awesome. That's coming along beautifully. So is it just that section there then that you're going to colour with that one colour? Yeah, so
just this section here, this last petal I'm now finishing, and then we'll switch to the darkest colour at the other end and just do the inner parts. So when you're adding colour, it's also good, as you'll see on the final piece, to leave some negative space which isn't shaded or coloured at all. So I'll switch to the dark end, and then we're just going to colour in the centre part of the petals.
Awesome, and that is with that darkest shade. So we can see there, Baz adding that colour in to the shade. That's it, we can really see there what it's doing. And that's amazing that that's just the same pen in a different shade that you've used there, and already gives it absolutely loads of dimension. So when it comes to then laying the colour, when you put the light source, I'm thinking out loud here, Baz, which this goes one of two ways.
Dangerous.
It's either really great and it's like a light bulb moment, we all feel enlightened, or everyone goes, oh, what a ridiculous thing to say. So when you're adding colour then, so the shading that you add in, or the light source, do you add shading to the colourings, or is it just the thickness of the line which creates the illusion of the light source?
No, you're exactly right. We will use shading at the end just to bring it to life. We'll use some shading as the last part, which is like the final stage.
Awesome.
So, sorry, I've coloured the inner part. What we'll do is go to the mid brush and just do the outer part of the circle. We've done the flat parts. What we're going to do now is just look at what they'll still be flat, but they're kind of on an angle, and they're angled away from the light. So I've got the mid-tone. I'm just going to put that on these two petals that are facing slightly away, just on the bottom edge. And again, on this one here.
So that would be the element that would be in the shade. Then
exactly that. Yeah. So if you can see that the light is shining on these parts, but these parts are slightly darker. And again, I'll do it on this one, which I think will be had a little bit of light on it. There and there. But if you can imagine, these will be slightly more in the shade, so I'll go switch to the dark part. And then just do these two petals that are facing away from the light.
And I guess this really is the joy, isn't it, of having the three shades in the one pen, that you don't need to sort of try and match them up. They're there ready to go for you.
And the good thing about it is I've always learned that if you start light, you can always add the depth on afterwards. So if you don't worry about it, it's not as dark as you'd think it should be, you can just add that depth and darkness at the end of it.
Awesome, really starting to see it come together. How are you getting on, Sarah?
I am totes getting on, Joe. I am loving it.
Awesome. Everyone's loving it at home as well. In the comments, Kat saying, Baz, thank you for sharing all your expertise in colouring these 3D mandalas. They are awesome. Lots of questions coming in as well. Lauren's asking what paper Baz is using. I'm guessing it is the alcohol proof Nina cardstock. I'm guessing. Is that right, Baz?
Yeah, that is. The markers work really well on this card. There's no bleed, they blend really well, and they keep the same amount of colour that you get. I mean, I do use watercolour for some of my originals, but actually I would recommend for anyone that's getting into using markers to use the card that I'm using now.
Awesome. Also, Lauren says, Baz, do you have to add anything to protect the images from fading before you frame them? That's a really great question. That's from Lauren's asked that.
I don't generally, no. I find that they don't fade as much as people think they do. But if people are worried about that, what I generally do is keep the original image separate, out of the way, and just recreate a print of it, so you've always got that original colour.
Awesome.
So we're just about finished there. I could just blend a couple of the corners.
So you're leaving quite a lot of open space then at this point?
Yeah, just at this point, yeah. We'll do some of the blending in the next stage, where you actually start to blend the colours to get 3D images of parts of the mandala that are not flat. We're going to my favourite part, which is the actual blending of the TriBlend brushes. So what we're going to do now is we're going to try and get all the edges that are either curved or non-flat to actually show a kind of gradient. So before I go to start working on this piece, I've just got another tip that I would give anybody doing any shading, which is to create your own colour chart on the same kind of paper that you're going to do your design on. So as you can see, this is all the TriBlend brushes, and I'm doing the same as you there, Joe, getting my words muddled up. There's actually 72 separate colours, but you can see, as Sarah said earlier on, how they gradient into each other. So I would recommend that anybody does that before they start working on their own design.
Awesome, top tip.
And then going back to the question that was raised earlier on, I tend to work light to dark, but I'd swap them around a little bit. So as you'll see on here, I'll start with the light one, and we'll do the outer edge first, and just flick it up just over halfway. Again, colouring just in the sort of halfway stage, and then flicking it up. And then I'll switch to the mid-tone.
It's awesome, isn't it? It's so good to be able to see it to come together. So how do you decide then with this outside edge, Baz, what tone goes where, if you will?
So it's all to do again with the light, your imaginary light source. So obviously the further away from the light source, the darker the shade should be. So as you can see at the minute, before I've done any blending, there's quite a definitive line between them. We want to try and get rid of that, so I'll go back to the light and then start blending that in, and then you should see a nice smooth transition there. And then I'll do the exact same thing with the darker tone to the mid-tone. So I'll go to the bottom of the mandala with the dark tone, shade it in at the bottom. Again, don't worry if there's not a smooth transition at this stage. And then switch back to your mid. There is a, switching backwards and forwards of pens, but it's worth it in the end. And then you can see that the dark blends into the mid-tone, and there should be a relatively smooth gradient on the outside of that mandala there.
I still find it magical that they blend so seamlessly into each other. I know I've seen it a million times now, but it never fails to amaze me how well these blend, Baz.
Yeah, they blend really well. These TriBlend, both the brushes and the pens, they blend really well. So I'm going to do the outer edge here, so we want this one to face away from it, but we want this one to appear that it's slightly curved inwards. So we're going to do the dark at the top there and the dark at the bottom there, and then gradient them out as you can see here. So just before you start shading in, just create a little negative space at the top, which will hopefully act as a little bit of a reflection at the top. Looks a bit odd on its own, but if you just do that and then shade in the rest of that circle with the lightest tone, so I should add that as the most important bit.
I've never done that before, left a white space like that and drawn that in. That's a brilliant idea. Joe is absolutely enamoured on my colouring. He's sat looking over my shoulder, following everything that I'm doing here. I've never known you so quiet there, Remy.
Honestly, I know. It is amazing. I'm loving watching these all come together. I can't wait to see everyone's finished ones that they're going to send in to us as well. It's going to look great.
So before you can see that I've even added any of the different colours, hopefully that little white mark in the middle should just give it a little bit of a dimension. And then I'll go to the mid-tone and just round the outer edge, facing towards the light source. I'll just do a very fine line, tracing it round, but then towards the bottom edge facing away from the light source, I'll put more of the mid-tone down and then fill that in like that. And then the most important part is blending that in, so going back to the light tone and then making that a nice smooth gradient.
Do you know, Baz, I'd never done that before. I've done spherical shapes, but I'd never done something spherical where we'd taken it to a light source as well.
Yeah.
So that is something, I've learnt something there that I can use in my everyday colouring, not just my mandala colouring, that I think is really useful there.
Excellent. So then just you're going back to the dark tone, we just want to create that sort of dark outer edge. So just shade in the very bottom of that circle away from the light sauce.
Amazing. Benita's saying it's so relaxing watching you colour. Tessie says mandalizing. That's what you're doing, Baz. You're mandalizing.
Love it. Love it. I think it should be trademarked, that, Baz. That sounds
Got to get
fab.
that trademark.
That's a great word.
There you go. So just blending the gradients. And again, there's no right or wrong way. You can switch between the colours to get those transitions smooth. And as Zara said earlier on, if you want to go a little bit darker, you can wait for it to dry a little bit and then just add a little bit more of the darker at the bottom. And then hopefully you should get a bit of the round effect. What I'm going to do now is just add some final bits of depth, which means basically creating some shadow on the design. So it's a bit like Zara said with the stamp that she was colouring earlier on. You want to get some shadow underneath the arm. Well, we're going to try and make sure that we get the mandala a little bit three-dimensional. So if I just use the fine liner to point out the areas, what we want is this round section here to be raised and create a shadow underneath. And the same with the petals of the mandala, we want them to create a bit of a shadow. So I'm going to adopt Zara's technique this time and work dark to light.
Oh, have I been teaching you something, Baz?
Learned something new today.
So I'm quite excited about that.
So we'll just start shading underneath the circle, and again we're kind of blending it up because we want that light source to create light there, so we don't want to put any of the dark ink above that area there in the middle.
So when you're working like this, Baz, how with a circle like this, do you kind of mentally split it into like different sections, and how many different sections would you say there are when you do, if you do split it like that?
I kind of just split it to where I think the light source would be. So if you can imagine this torch light here, I don't know if you can see it on the screen, came all the way out shining a light, it would shine a light to this part of the circle. So everything underneath it should theoretically be in shadow. So again, I add the darkest bit first, then move to the mid-tone, just creating a bit of a gradient. And then I go back to the dark tone, so just to blend those two in. You can already see there's a little bit of a shadow underneath that circle there. And then what I'll do is I'll move to the light tone. But this is where I have to be a little bit careful, because if I start using too much of the light on these darker pieces here, these darker petals, it'll start actually taking the ink off. So I'm going to focus on where there's either no ink or where the ink is very light. So again, I'm just going to try and blend here on the white, around this little part here, getting that smooth grain again on the white, on this part of the petal, along here on the white, taking care not to really draw on the darker part of the petal, and then you can see that should create a bit of a shadow. So what we'll do next is we'll just add some shadow to the petals of the mandala. So again, we're going to start with the dark, and everywhere where we put the thicker line, which is the easiest way to remember it.
Yep.
So if you did a thick line, that's where you want to add a little bit of shadow. We're just going to put a little bit of the darker colour on.
Oh, this is my favourite bit, Baz. This is my favourite bit.
This is almost like the reveal, this bit, isn't it? As you add that darker tone, you can really start to see that depth and dimension. It's really starting to pop off of the page, which is awesome. Loads of people loving this. Michelle says, Baz, your picture looks so wonderfully realistic. Jacqueline as well saying, oh my word, that is absolutely beautiful. Love the colour. And Judy saying, I love to learning how to colour properly. So thank you so much. And I guess really then, Baz, it is just about following those stages, isn't it? Knowing the rules, sticking to the rules and being methodical.
Exactly that. I mean, you'll see with the designs in the Discovery Kit, they're a little bit, some are a little bit more technical than the other, but the principles are exactly the same. And the good thing about the TriBlended pens is that you can create that detail with them, and you can shade into the little nooks and crannies, for want of a better word.
Do you know, it's so much easier with the brush as well, isn't it, than with the... I mean, it's lovely with the regular TriBlends, but because mine's a little bit bigger than yours as well, it's so much easier for me to work with that brush. I can see if you're doing the smaller one, it would be brilliant to do it with the... to do it with the fine tip pens.
Do you know what? And yours is looking really, really similar to Baz's, Sarah, I will say.
What can I say? I had a good teacher.
So we're just going to, just where the lighter bits at the end of the petals, you can just use the lightest colour just to get that blend, as you did with the other ones, just so there's not much of a strict line, for want of a better word.
Mm-hmm.
How much of your spare time would you say you spend working on, you know, art and colouring, Baz?
It just depends. Sometimes it can be like 6 or 7 hours a week. Sometimes I don't get to do any, just depending on the hours I'm at work, but as often as I can, really.
Awesome.
So we've just done the main petals, and all we're going to do is just these inner petals with the white edge and the dark centre. Mm-hmm. Again, we're going to just try and give them a little bit more depth. So working to where the lines are a little bit thicker. Start with the dark, just add a little bit of shadow. One final little tip with the edge, if you go back to the art liners, now if you rushed it a little bit and you've gone over the line somewhere, if you go back to the art liners, you can start sharpening up some of the lines. So you can see there where I've gone over the edges slightly. If I just thicken the lines up slightly, it just sharpens everything up.
And this is funny because it's not. This is exactly what Benita taught us last week when we were watercolouring as well. Benita was using actually a watercolour pencil at the end to go back over the lines to give it loads of definition too, which was it seems like there's a few tips which seem to run through all the different styles of colouring, which is reassuring.
And you're going to spend as little amount of time or as long as you want on this final stage of just using the darker fine liner just to sharpen everything up. But hopefully you should see that on the camera.
How do you decide, Baz, when like enough is enough? Is it hard to know, like, right, that's it, I'm done, I'm going to walk away now?
Yeah, it's definitely very hard to do. My advice would be, if you think you need to stop, stop. And then you can always go back to it another day with a fresh set of eyes.